Welcome back, and now for the news in detail. We start with the US, which says it wants New Delhi to quickly lift restrictions in Indian-occupied Kashmir. State Department South Asia official Alice Wells has also asked New Delhi to release detained political leaders. Talking to reporters in Washington, Wells called on the Indian government to resume political engagement with the Kashmiri leaders. She said the United States is concerned over widespread imprisonment of politicians and businessmen. Wells said the world will benefit from reduced tensions and increased dialogue between Pakistan and India. She said, considering the escalating situation, US President Donald Trump is willing to mediate if asked by both parties. The crushing curfew and communication blackout by New Delhi in Indian-occupied Kashmir has entered its 54th day. Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan will address the 74th session of the United Nations General Assembly today. In his speech, he will highlight the worsening human rights situation in Indian-occupied Kashmir under New Delhi's lockdown. Khan will also hold a meeting with the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres on the sidelines. Earlier, speaking at the dialogue on financing for development, Khan called for a closure of tax havens. He called for effective measures to combat money laundering, corruption, and tax evasion. He said these sanctuaries of ill-gotten money are devastating developing countries across the world. Khan shared Pakistan government's efforts to alleviate poverty, rein in corruption, and money laundering. Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan says the only person who can mediate on Kashmir is US President Donald Trump. In an interview, Khan said there is likelihood of bloodshed in occupied Kashmir once India lifts the curfew. The Prime Minister said a huge humanitarian crisis is brewing in the occupied valley. He said peace in Afghanistan will benefit Pakistan the most. Khan said there is no military solution to the 18-year-old Afghan conflict. He also said it is in the interest of the entire world if the US and Iran avoid a conflict. Pakistan has boycotted the opening statement of Indian External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar at the SARC meeting in New York. Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi said Pakistan will not engage with the butchers of Kashmir until and unless India lifts its siege of occupied Kashmir. Meanwhile, Pakistan says it is ready to host the 19th summit of the South Asian Association for Regional Cooperation in Islamabad. Speaking after the ministerial meeting, Qureshi said dates for the summit will be proposed soon. Qureshi said India had objected to the proposal last year but remained silent this year. He said no member country have objected to the summit being held in Islamabad. Islamabad says India is trying to divert world's attention from occupied Kashmir through propaganda against Pakistan. The acting foreign secretary briefed envoys of the permanent UNSC members about intensified Indian propaganda about so-called terrorist camps in Pakistan. The official said India is using unfounded allegations to build the ground to justify a false flag operation. He said Indian statements are a threat to regional peace and Pakistan will befittingly respond to any misadventure. Pakistan urged the P5 countries to ask India to show evidence to corroborate its fallacious claims. Pakistan is marking Kashmir Solidarity Day today to express support for the people in Indian-occupied Kashmir. The Interior Ministry issued a theme, "Let us save the innocent children of Indian-occupied Jammu and Kashmir." Rallies will be held across the country to express support for the people of the occupied valley. Kashmiris are facing a scarcity of basic essentials and particular life-saving drugs. The curfew has affected children and the elderly people as well as those suffering from serious ailments. The crushing curfew and communication blackout by New Delhi in Indian-occupied Kashmir has now entered its 54th day. The Afghan government has deployed more than 100,000 troops to guard polling stations for Saturday's presidential elections. The measure was taken after the Taliban said they will block all the roads on polling day and attack all election-related activity. One of the 18 contesting candidates, Gulbuddin Hikmatyar, has also threatened violence if the government rigs elections. The British embassy in Kabul has condemned threats by Hikmat Yar and Taliban. Former MP for Faryab, Bashir Ahmed Tayyaj, says majority districts will not be safe enough for voting. He ruled out polling in at least 20 districts across Maidan Wardak, Ghazni, Faryab and Nuristan province. Meanwhile, government forces and the Taliban have claimed killing each other's troops in various encounters. The US has announced the deployment of 200 troops, 4 Sentinel radar systems and Patriot missiles to Saudi Arabia. The Pentagon says the arrangement will bolster Riyadh's defense of critical military and civilian infrastructure. In a statement, the US military said it is putting additional capabilities on to prepare to deploy orders. 2 more Patriot batteries and a missile defense system will be prepared to go in case of a crisis. The deployment augments an already significant presence of the US forces in the region. The move comes in the aftermath of the September 14 attacks on Saudi Arabia's oil facilities. Saudi Arabia has called for global action against Iran, accusing it of the recent attacks on Riyadh's oil facilities. In his speech at the UN General Assembly, Saudi Foreign Minister Ibrahim bin Abdulaziz Al Assaf called the strike a real test of the international community's will. He said Iran has jeopardized world energy supplies as well as the international peace and the global economy. Assaf said Tehran's sources of finance should be cut off until it renounces its ballistic missile program. The foreign minister said the kingdom has never promoted war but will defend its holy sites and sovereignty. Meanwhile, at a press conference in New York, Iran's President Hassan Rouhani said Tehran had nothing to do with the attacks. Turkey says it will continue its trade with Iran despite the threat of the US sanctions. President Tayyip Erdogan said it is impossible for Ankara to stop buying oil and gas from Tehran. Speaking in Ankara, Erdogan said his country does not want to sever its cooperation with Tehran. Earlier, Erdogan cautioned against blaming Iran for attacks on Saudi Arabia's oil facilities. He said it will be inappropriate to put the entire burden on Tehran without sufficient evidence. The UN atomic watchdog says Iran has started enriching uranium with advanced centrifuges. The IAEA says the Iranian move is a breach of the 2015 nuclear deal with the world powers. The report said Iran is also reinstalling 2 cascades that were removed under the deal. The agreement allows Tehran to enrich uranium with less efficient centrifuges. Iran scaled down its compliance with the deal in July in retaliation for the US withdrawal from the accord last year. Washington has also reimposed economic sanctions on Iran withdrawn under the agreement. The British-flagged Stena Impero oil tanker has left the Iranian port of Bandar Abbas and begun its journey home. The vessel was detained by Iran's Revolutionary Guards in the Strait of Hormuz for alleged marine violations in July. Tracking data shows the Stena has set a new destination for UAE's port Rashid in Dubai. Iranian authorities accused the Stena Impero of failing to observe international maritime law at the time of his seizure. The Impero was held after Britain seized an Iranian tanker of the territory of Gibraltar. In Egypt, nearly 2,000 protesters have been arrested as calls for President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi's resignation intensify. The government has begun rounding up prominent opposition leaders ahead of mass protests planned after Friday prayers today. This week, thousands have taken part in demonstrations across the country in defiance of a 2013 ban. Prosecutors, in a statement, said the security forces arrested some foreign nationals in Cairo, including a Palestinian and a Dutch national. The demonstrations were called by self-exiled Egyptian businessman Muhammad Ali, who accuses al-Sisi of corruption. Al-Sisi has dismissed the allegations. The European Union says Britain will be responsible if the talks for a Brexit deal fail. In an interview, EU Commission President Jean-Claude Juncker said the bloc is doing all it can to avoid a no deal. Juncker said he and Brexit negotiator Michel Barnier are working intensively for an agreement. He said it will be catastrophic for Britain and the bloc if the UK left without a proper withdrawal. Earlier in Brussels, MEP Guy Verhofstadt and Barnier expressed dismay at the UK's bids for a new deal. Verhofstadt said Britain's proposals for a Brexit deal fell short of expectations on key points. Barnier said the bloc is still ready to work on a concrete proposal if London provides any. The United States has announced travel sanctions against Cuba's leader Raul Castro and his family. The former president is accused of violating human rights. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo says Castro oversees a system that arbitrarily detains thousands of Cubans. Pompeo said Cuba holds more than 100 political prisoners. Pompeo also said he took the step due to Castro's support for Venezuela's leader Nicolas Maduro. It's time for a short break, but coming up next in the bulletin. Educating people on garbage management. And patients battle heavy stigma in Casablanca. Welcome back. Tens of thousands of students have gathered across New Zealand for a second global school strike for climate action. The latest round of the protests built on the last week's marches by millions of children around the world. The organizers of the school strike for climate reported 170,000 people protested nationwide. Students delivered a petition to the parliament calling on the government to declare a climate emergency. The strike is planned to roll through Asia and Europe before culminating in a rally in Montreal, Canada. Teenage activist Greta Thunberg is scheduled to speak to the rally. Sanctions or no sanctions, where there is demand, there is supply. That is also true in North Korea, where a local smartphone business is thriving despite international sanctions. As many as 6 million North Koreans now have the smartphones. This report has more.
This is the Pyongyang 2423, a North Korean smartphone launched in late 2018. Despite sanctions prohibiting trade with the country, the phone has a chipset made by Taiwan's MediaTek and a memory card made by Japan's Toshiba. The phone also uses Google's Android software.
If you look at the hardware of the Pyongyang 2423, the chip is from a Taiwanese manufacturer called MediaTek. But the SIM card is not. The hardware is made up of parts supplied from various countries.
Both MediaTek and Toshiba have denied shipping any parts to North Korea, while Google says its open-source Android software can be used by any manufacturer, meaning it has not violated any sanctions either. With nearly a quarter of the population using smartphones, the telecom sector has become a major source of government revenue. But getting a cell phone still costs an average North Korean a fortune.
I sold 2 pigs. I also smuggled herbs into China and collected renminbi. I saved selling anything in my home that was worth money. That's how I bought a cell phone.
It remains to be seen how the international community will stop prohibited hardware from reaching North Korean shores. But for now, it seems the use of smartphones will only increase in the People's Republic.
In Chile and Panama, local communities are trying to improve their management of plastic waste. Numerous recycling initiatives and education programs on plastic waste management are currently underway in both the countries. This report has the details.
Chile is one of Latin America's top garbage generators. Every year, the country generates nearly 1 million tons of plastic and recycles only 8.5%. 3 years earlier, several Latin American countries passed a law that promotes recycling.
The way we have tried to make that change is through the development of a system that allow companies to understand that what they have in their hands is not waste, but a byproduct that has value, so it can be reintegrated into the production chain.
This floating barrier in Panama regularly stops around 30 tons of garbage from flowing into the ocean.
We'd love to put one underneath it as well, because a lot of the garbage floats either at the surface or below. But to put something underneath the system would potentially trap not only the garbage, but animals as well, crocodiles, turtles, fish.
The local community says the authorities should take tangible measures.
People care more. They care about ecology much more, much more. That was not done before because they threw everything together. With the garbage, everything mixed. They threw out potatoes, all vegetables, onion and carrots, but not anymore. Now people separate everything into bags. Our work in the community is practically alone because the authorities don't come out here. They don't do their job. They only spend their time making their political announcements. But really nothing is visible here. I do feel that the authorities have to do their job.
Chile and Panama both have approved a ban on single-use plastic bags. By next year, people using plastic bags will be fined. But it's still an uphill battle as throwing trash in the street is still culturally acceptable.
As the world makes headway in the battle against HIV, Morocco has also shown some progress. For people infected with the disease, there remains a heavy stigma. More in this report.
In Casablanca, a group therapy workshop offers HIV patients a rare opportunity to speak openly about their disease. The ALCS also organises follow-up therapeutic care and screening campaigns with funding from the Global Fund to fight AIDS, tuberculosis and malaria. But despite this, some groups remain vulnerable.
What allows us to decrease infection rates is largely due to our work with the most exposed populations. And we have a lot of apprehension about the sustainability of the financing of this work if the Global Fund were to quit Morocco.
In this conservative society, HIV patients seldom talk publicly about the virus. The shame of the disease is so entrenched, it even permeates the medical establishment.
Moroccan society is a society without any mercy, not necessarily with your family and friends, but the whole society. There are educated people and others who are not.
With funding declining globally and controversy surrounding the management of UNAIDS, ALCS fears financial cuts. Morocco's fate will be determined at a 3-yearly conference for the Global Fund in October.
Asian stock markets have traded low over uncertainty surrounding the US-China trade talks. Worries over rising political risks following an impeachment inquiry against President Trump have also negatively impacted the markets. With growing pressure on the corporate sector, profits at China's industrial companies dropped. Hong Kong Hang Seng slipped 0.3%. Reeling into the overall trend, Japan's the Nikkei 225 and South Korea's Kospi fell over 1%. Australia's ASX 200 climbed to 0.43%. Trade negotiations between the US and China are set to resume on October 10th in Washington. Now the weather situation from around the globe. And that's all for now. Thank you for watching. For further updates, stay tuned to Indus.